Beginning around 8000 BCE, great changes began to take place. This is the Mesolithic period. Remember, it's that transitional period, and eventually it develops into the Neolithic period. The Neolithic period developed at different times in different regions. The warming of the climate brought an end to the Ice Age, but it was very gradual. Physically, it would have been unnoticed by the people, but it altered their lives drastically. So the environment changes, it becomes warmer, and this means that Europe sprouts grassy plains, and this creates new edible plants and forests that become home to great herds of animals. Also during this time, they invented the bow and arrow, which is more accurate than spear throwers. So that assisted in hunting. The changes in the environment also led to the domestication of animals and agriculture. Agriculture led to the establishment of settled communities, the role of farmers in culture, and eventually farmers were able to produce enough food so that other community members could fulfill other roles, political roles, military roles, or ceremonial roles. Now, to be classified as a Neolithic civilization, you had to have an organized system of agriculture, you had to have domesticated animals, and you had to have permanent year-round settlements. Of course, with all these changes in the environment and culture and tradition, we'll see changes in art. Some of the things that are new are that they'll start producing more geometric forms combined with people and animals. People will be depicted as engaged in everyday activities. Instead of creating these images in caves that are really hard to get to, they'll start using rock shelters, which is what I have depicted up here. This one's actually from the Southwest. I believe this one's from Chaco Canyon, but you kind of get the idea of what a rock shelter would look like. It's also going to be more abstract in some of the cave art that we saw. We saw that with the hollow bulls and the Altamira bison, that it started to get naturalistic with the depiction of texture and shading and things like that. But art during the Neolithic period on these rock shelters are more abstract. They use a simple line drawing technique, often in one color, or they can do something like they did at Chaco Canyon, which is a petroglyph. They will also have new themes, which will have people. They're very common. We rarely saw them in the Paleolithic period, but now in the Neolithic period, people will be depicted. And they'll be depicted in energetic poses, sometimes in battle, maybe hunting, sometimes dancing. We see examples of this in Spain, in rock shelters. Here we see narrative scenes of dozens of small figures, men, women, and children, also animals and insects. This particular one in Spain dates from 4000 to 2000 BCE. In this image, we see a number of women over on this side, and they are either strolling or standing about. Some are holding hands. The women have very small waists that are emphasized by their skirts. They also have large calves and sturdy ankles, and their hair appears to be shoulder length. The animals that are animals are kind of depicted all around them, and then we have this one here who is depicted in what we call the flying gallop. And the flying gallop is used to indicate speed of a running animal. Other scenes at this site show women caring for children, women carrying baskets, gathering food, and combing the earth with digging sticks. So basically, it's recording daily life. But we also think that it probably had a greater meaning. We know that it was repainted many times, and it was also revisited over thousands of years. It is very accessible. It's not like those caves that you have to climb and find and, bring your torches. This is kind of out in the open so you can actually see it. We know that it was even visited after its original purpose had been forgotten. So it was visited by Roman-era visitors. And here's just a close-up so you can kind of get some more details of the women and the animals as well. During the Neolithic period, people began to settle into communities of agricultures. They built large structures to live in. They also built storage spaces and shelters for animals. Now in Europe, for the most part, people were able to build wooden structures. So they probably built something like a wood longhouse. We think that they were probably up to 150 feet long. They may have held 40 to 50 people, and they also had some storage space. They were probably made of branches woven in between to form the walls. Now, of course, these don't survive because they're made of wood. Dwellings were clustered in villages, and tombs and ritual centers were traditionally built outside of the settlement. In today's northern Scotland, we actually have a unique opportunity to see some Neolithic structures in the Orkney Islands. Between 3100 and 2600 BCE, people built dwellings in this area. But instead of using wood, because they actually didn't have an abundance of wood in this area, they built their structures out of flagstone. This site is known as Skara brae, and originally it was farther from the sea. So when you look at this image, it looks like it's right next to the sea, and even on the map too. It's in the Orkney Islands. But originally it wouldn't have been quite so close to the sea, but of course erosion has made it so that it now is. The reason that these Neolithic structures were preserved is that there was probably a storm, and they were preserved under sand dunes. There was another storm in the 1860s, and the structures were uncovered. Now what's exciting for us is that this is the most complete Neolithic village that has ever been discovered. Now this is older than Stonehenge. The village consists of about 10 houses clustered together with covered stone passageways between them. About 50 people probably lived at the site at a time. Again, there's not abundance of wood here, so they're going to use flagstone to create these structures. The great thing about flagstone is that it's already cut into rough size by the tide, so it makes it kind of easy to put together. They built their houses using the corbelling technique. Corbelling is a method of using rows or layers of stone that are laid with the end of each row projecting beyond the row beneath until opposing layers almost meet or do meet. Archaeologists believe that these structures were originally roofed with timber and whalebone. The houses were then completely covered with earth and thatching for insulation against the harsh winter climate. This also made the houses more stable. The houses are about 430 square feet, so you really didn't need a big workforce for this. You just need, people who were living here would build their homes. So this is what the structures look like. They're a large room and they contain a house, and they have built-in furniture. So here we can see a bed over here, some shelves over here, probably another bed originally over here, and a hearth, and then a tank that may have held, it's like a water-sealed tank, that could have held maybe live bait, or could have been used for washing or something like that. 7 of the houses have similar furniture, with beds and dressers in the same places in each house. This means that they're uniformed, they're standard. So some of the beds have been engraved with simple designs. They probably would have been covered with warm furs and filled with heather mattresses, which is like a plant mattress. The dwellings are connected through covered passageways, which is great because it's really cold in this area. Well, I mean, it's pretty cold in this area, and also very windy, so you could be protected from the elements in these covered passageways. Each dwelling was entered through a low doorway that had a stone slab door. The structures also had a sophisticated drainage system that was incorporated into the village's design. They also had what we think was a primitive form of a toilet in each dwelling. So what can we learn from these structures? We can learn how people lived. So when they're living here on the water, they probably did some agriculture. There's kind of some archaeological debate on whether they did agriculture or not. But they probably mostly lived off the sea. So they were probably fishermen. They also kept animals. We know that some of these structures were built to hold animals. And the way of life, the way they build these houses, is responding to the environment around them. They have these strong, insulated houses. There's also a sense of community here. They're built closely together, and no structure seems bigger than the other. So that means there's not really a strong sense of hierarchy in this culture. But there is some sort of organization since we have these very standard unified units. We don't know what their religion was, but likely it was something to do with the sea, since they were so dependent on the sea for subsistence. This place was abandoned, likely because of a major storm, and they did leave behind lots of stuff, like necklaces and personal things. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot of it because it is, one, so old, but also the site has been heavily looted. Here's an aerial view of what Skara brae now looks like. So you can see some of those beds, those hearths. Through here, there's the one that we were looking at earlier. And here are some reconstructions and artist recreations of what it may have looked like when it was originally built.